Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, A CTO's View, Devising a Secure Cloud Strategy. I'm Rachel Chisholm, Marketing Manager here at Armor and the host for today's broadcast. Before we get started, I'd like to cover a few webinar housekeeping tips. All attendees are currently on mute, and you will remain so throughout the duration of the broadcast. Please use the chat window to inform us if you have any audio or technical issues. If you do have some initial sound issues, we recommend calling in via phone instead of audio through your computer. We want to ensure we're discussing topics that are pertinent to you, so not only will there be a few live polls throughout the webinar, but we hope you will engage with us by answering them when they show up on your screen. Throughout and at the end of the presentation, we would love to answer any questions you may have. Please use the question feature to submit your questions about any of the topics being discussed. Lastly, we will be recording today's webinar, and an edited version will be made available to you post-event. And if you would like a copy of the slides themselves, there is a PDF in the handout feature of the GoToWebinar that you can easily download these for your reference later on. With us today, we have Josh Vasquez, Chief Technology Officer here at Armor, and MJ DiBerardino from Chief Technology Officer of Cloud Nexus. Josh is responsible for all aspects of Armor's engineering and product development and leads both the development and engineering teams. MJ has over 15 years of experience in manufacturing, financial services, healthcare, entertainment, and IT services, and he's spent the last 8 years working with cloud management companies. So with that, Josh, I'm going to turn it over to you so we can get started.
Thanks, Rachel. So yeah, a little bit about Armor. Armor is a security as a service provider. So as you think about how organizations are moving to cloud, as Cloud Nexus helps folks do, you're always thinking about who can handle security and compliance services as you reside in cloud. We also go further into hybrid. So if you're in an on-premise solution or you're in a multi-cloud environment, we can offer security services as well as compliance services as you go across that journey. MJ?
Thanks, Josh. Cloud Nexus is a premier partner with AWS. We also help our clients with Azure and GCP as well. We've been in the program for a little over 10 years. We're actually AWS is one of their first partners. We focus on migrations and helping our clients create strong cloud journeys and strategies when they want to, really make that leap and move into the cloud.
Perfect. For a little bit about the agenda, we're going to talk about how cloud changes everything. We'll also get into a little bit of modernization, how teams, organizations are changing as cloud initiatives come on board. We'll talk about how do you formulate your secure cloud strategy. What are some of the things to know, some of the pitfalls, and then we'll wrap up with a little bit of Q&A. So let's dig in. So how you think about cloud changing everything, I mean, you really do think about all of the things that were of yesteryear. I mean, it was only a year ago, but you think about going from a data center on-prem solution moving into the cloud, you start thinking about what were the things that you used to do that you don't do any longer, or what cloud brings. Top of mind is always looking at the financial aspect, right? You go from CapEx models into OpEx models. Everybody goes from fixed spend into consumption-based, into the utility-based billing. But really, when you think about cloud and the speed of innovation that it's brought for product delivery teams, you start thinking about from a security perspective of what does that mean? If you look at the two things, I would say that I think about it's really the unified visibility across environments as well as some of that continuous compliance. So as you devise that plan, you really have to check the boxes, I would say, in some of the newer terrain that's out there. So when you think about an on-prem solution, it's really around network being 50% of what you have to look at, and then the other 50% is really in-host OS, and then you can devise your plan around that. But as you get into the cloud, the number one thing that I think that we hear most often is what's that visibility? I have my DevOps teams turning up environments, and I really don't understand, or I don't have a handle on what things are getting put into the cloud in the posture as it sits. So I would say that when you start thinking about everything that's changed, it truly is, I would say, everything. But as you think about it from a security perspective, it's just a newer terrain, not necessarily a change, but moving into another aspect. MJ, what do you think about it?
It's definitely the same thing. And just to add in there, really when people start making that journey into the cloud, a lot of expectations come with it. Everybody has their own mindset and goals of what they hope to achieve, but one big uniform item that most of our clients and most of what we see out there is around the automation aspect in this concept of infrastructure less, because now you don't have servers, you have services. In making that leap into services, a huge advantage is the automation that you can achieve through it. And it's changing that mindset now to, what commonly known as infrastructure as code, and being able to fully script out not only your application deployments, but the supporting infrastructure that goes along with it. And a huge advantage is that you're going to achieve throughout that journey. And as you start driving towards this concept, is you're going to be able to experience things like self-healing applications. This was extremely difficult in the traditional, sense of IT, and especially when you had a lot of, racks and servers. But now you can get into more of a concept that what you're creating on the cloud, it can be stateless, it can be temporary, it can be throwaway. And now you're really taking that advantage of not only the cost savings, but also that full automation that comes along with it. And then just to, round it out, and Josh mentioned it before, the continuous compliance monitoring, huge advantage, and big dynamic change and shift with the security posture, but being very policy driven within your infrastructure deployments, as far as to say, when you have specific industry compliance needs, you can put policies in place to prevent or to help, ease you into more of a standardized deployment method with compliance.
Perfect. Thanks, MJ. So as you could think about it, and you think about some of the benefits of cloud, it's really a couple of things. I mean, it's about cost, it's about elasticity. As MJ talked about, it's about as he coined it, throwaway. So if you're thinking about some of those initiatives, which we'll get into in a little bit, I mean, I think teams have to be prepared. And I think when you think about preparation, you think about who's all involved in that preparation. And I think that, at least from our perspective, what we see from clients, and, we'll get MJ's perspective, but it's across the board. So if you think about just some of the departments that have to change, and I alluded to it a minute ago, which if you're thinking about finance teams are having to think about CapEx, versus OpEx, development teams are thinking about containers versus serverless. You have security thinking about, does my incident management process, does it adhere? How does that new terrain of cloud, how does it fit into my incident response plans, and can I replay them? Are they effective? You have your compliance teams thinking about, their assessment of their current programs and how does it fit in from that continuous compliance model. So as you think about who's all involved in your cloud strategy, we say the whole company, but it does change quite a bit. So it definitely takes I would say a village to be part of a cloud strategy initiative. MJ, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone's still driving towards ROI. And, what are the true gains and values that they're going to receive from making a big shift and proceed into this cloud journey? There's nothing worse than planning in a silo and having to go back and redeploy or replan after the fact. Having the entire company involved everywhere, anything from executives down to IT managers. It's extremely important that everybody is driving towards the same goals, and you have a common strategy in mind. Because, like I said, more often than not, many people they start planning in silos, and it really causes a lot of rework at the end of the day, which you can really avoid up front.
Totally agree. Looks like we have a webinar poll. I'll hand this over to Rachel.
Wonderful. Yes. Our first poll question: what is your primary motivation for moving to the cloud? would be flexibility and scalability, cost, security, or time to market. We'll give you guys a few seconds to get your answers in. A couple more seconds. Looks like almost everybody is in. Wonderful. Okay, so let's see what these results look like. Flexibility and scalability, I think, to no one's surprise, is the majority. But also cost. I think that that's a huge reason. We look at the DevOps and even SaaS companies, people who are trying to scale and grow their business and in deployments, and doing that with the flexibility and scale as they grow larger as a business, it's huge. But also the cost, right? Like moving off premise to a cloud, to an AWS, to where there's more shared resources. So the cost is significantly reduced. I think it's huge for people. What do you think about this, Josh?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's one of the primary reasons why a lot of our infrastructure sits within that cloud. It was for those two reasons. It was, how do you scale systems and solutions that are bringing in terabytes of data, and you have to protect it? And make sure that all engineering staff has enough infrastructure on demand to be able to handle that resiliency. And of course, me being in my position, cost is always a factor. It's always top of mind for us as we make decisions from an objectives perspective. MJ, what do you think?
Yeah, no surprise here at all. It's the common theme continually when we go into creating these strategies and plans with clients, especially around the availability. Nothing's worse than when you have an application that's really taken off in the market, and then you just run out of capacity. Nothing worse than that, and the cloud really alleviates a lot of that stress for you.
Absolutely. All right, let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about modernization. You hear it quite a bit. I think there's been a lot of talks about it, I think, over the years, from how do I handle DevOps modernization? How do I handle infrastructure as code? How do I handle, moving into the cloud, and what are those first steps and why? And I think for us, we really look at it from, I would say, a strategic perspective, at least where we sit in our daily job. So as MJ and I are thinking about it, yes, we think about, I would say, the technology that's underlying and how does that change organizations to be nimble with the cloud to gain the benefits that everybody just pulled off of. But I would say it starts from top down. I'll let MJ go first on this one, kind of get his perspective, and then I'll round it out.
Yeah, sure. I mean, just looking at the poll previously, cost is definitely a driver, and it's a big decision when moving into the cloud, and it's also an expectation that by moving to the cloud, you're going to inherently receive cost savings. That could definitely be true. It always will depend on how you're planning and what your goals are, and if you're going to be bringing more into the cloud than you had previously or not. But really, what ended up driving a lot of the cost savings is that concept of modernization. It's taking your environments, your applications from stateful to stateless. Once you can do that and embrace the concept of what modernization really means and what it is about, and that's becoming more of a stateless, decoupled type of application or environment, then you can really truly start to understand how all the vast services and platform as a service and function as a service and database as a service, how you can start taking advantage of these and then pushing it down your organization, to really drive home what your expectation was from a cost savings perspective. When you think about modernization, it can be daunting because there's so many different concepts out there. DevOps has been around for a while now. It's a big push. There's still a lot of companies that are starting to embrace it. But now the idea is taking it to the next step. And the next step is going from DevOps to DevSecOps and not forgetting the security. Security is such an important factor within modernization because it's almost as if your application environment is becoming more open. You have to make sure you take those proper security precautions when embracing modernization.
Yeah, and I would say, just just tying in from I would say an alignment perspective as an example of gaining those benefits as we think about, taking a strategic approach to get some cost savings around infrastructure. You would say there would be a DevOps team that would look at their data centers and say, well, you know what, I can consolidate, the percentage that was talked about as part of my IT service group. And you jump right into the cloud and a lot of, this is a real world example that they moved into the cloud and what was left off a little bit was they found out that there was a breach. So what you look at from why we keep talking about alignment is that if your DevOps groups were in alignment with security and compliance group, let's say in your planning phase or what has to be done, you would have the DevOps guys writing their infrastructure as code that'll be deployed, and you'll have your security and compliance groups talking about, well, let's get a cloud security posture management platform in place. Let's start thinking about what policies that we need to drive or we need to adhere to around this infrastructure that's about to get deployed. And let's talk to the security teams to make sure that all the detections are in place that relate to the services that they're about to use, right? So if I'm in AWS and I need to listen in on guard duty or CloudTrail, do I have the right amount of sensors or detectors out into the platform to make sure that as you gain that, or I would say the reduction, or you get the drive back into profitability, you would say, now I'm in a good place. And all of that stemmed from, I would say, alignment of the teams. I would say that as long as they're planning it together and working together, we've seen quite a bit, or I would say, as of late, some of the strongest things that we're seeing out there from a misstep perspective as it relates to security and compliance is really misconfigurations. People are leaving stuff open or leaving stuff open to the public and they're getting found. And so you can circumvent that whole process as long as you're aligned in your strategic view. And as you move into the cloud and you implement together, I think as long as you have that approach that MJ was talking about, which was that whole DevSecOps movement, as long as you have those groups working together, you can move into the cloud safely. So let's talk a little bit about modernization and transformation. I'm going to let MJ, I know he has a good perspective on this one. I'll let him kick this one off.
Yeah, I mean, nowadays, cloud, it's here to stay. But really what people want to do as part of their journey, and especially as part of their migration planning, is how do you incorporate modernization? How do you make that transition into actually fully taking advantage of what the cloud has to offer, and not necessarily just a lift and shift in moving your workloads from a data center to just a virtual cloud environment? I mean, it comes in many forms. Modernization, it means many different things to many different people. It can be DevOps, DevSecOps, microservices, serverless, and machine learning, and IoT. You've heard all of these buzzwords. But really, you have to step back. You first have to take inventory of what you have today, truly understand why you have these applications, why are they designed the way they're designed, but what goals do they contribute to your organization? What are the objectives? What are the functionality? How is that affecting your customer base? And by not modernizing, what are you potentially losing out on? So that's really the first thing that you need to do. You need to have proper inventory and understanding of what you have today, what is in place, and more importantly, why is it there? So then you can start re-examining it and understanding what can be updated, what can be modernized, and what can be more cloud native. And then from there, you start creating your clear objectives, and you can incrementally work towards them, but also understanding what works for your organization. Not everybody is going to be able to just fully jump right in, and nor is anybody expected to. And if that's the expectation, maybe you have to, think more about, think about your journey and why you want to do that. But if you step back and you can understand clearly from a corporate-wide structure of what your objectives are, then you'll be able to create the proper steps to work towards those goals.
Absolutely. Thanks, MJ. Yeah, when I think about, modernization and transformation, you really think about it. We've gone through that journey here at Armor, and we were part of the latest books to come out on DevOps, and well, let's start leveraging it out of the gates and infrastructure as code, and we're all in. And if some of my team members are listening on the phone, they'll know exactly who they are when I say this, is that they were ready to jump in tomorrow. And this was without the transformation step, right? So it was modernization at a IT tech level to go infrastructure as code, and everything can be tore down. And as you think about what your strategies are of patching, for example, just a simple patching strategy, right? Everybody, I would say, you're used to patching once a week as patches come out. And when you get into infrastructure as code, it was a modernization to say, well, we're just going to tear it down, or we're going to patch, and we're going to stand up some new infrastructure out there, so it's always going to be in a good state. So you look at that modernization that has happened through that technology. Well, if you're a compliance organization and you have to rely on PCI, which we do internally, you have to start thinking about the transformative steps that have to occur, because, right, it goes all the way out to change management. Now you start thinking about how you think of your ITIL process. So everything from your asset lists going out to change control of your new solution that you're about to deploy. You're going to have to transform a lot of your business processes to align with, I would say, the modernization of technology that you're leveraging, all the way out to training your organization. Your organization now has what the cloud has allowed for, which was speed of delivery of product. Now you're talking about, support organizations that are answering the phone of products that are hitting market every 2 weeks, features that are hitting every 2 weeks. So there's a transformation that has to happen as you get into more of an agile approach to product delivery. That modernization and transformation, they're coupled, right? It's not an isolated event for you to go modernize technology, but you're going to have to transform your organization to rely on all of the benefits that you get. So as you start thinking about what's the ultimate goal, the ultimate goal for companies is to build products and services and provide business value quickly. So to realize that is not just a modernization of technology approach. You really have to get into the transformation of business processes as well. We have another webinar poll. I'll hand this over to Rachel.
Perfect. Yeah, so you guys had showcased why you guys would want to move to the cloud. We'd love to know now what your concerns and challenges would be when you do move to the cloud. Is it around security, lack of resources, compliance, or cost? And we will give you guys a few seconds to answer this. It looks like the majority of people are in. If you haven't voted and you want to get in, I'll give you 2 more seconds. Perfect. Okay, so let's see. Our answers, security being the resounding challenge. I think that there's a lot of people, they understand the security elements and how it works from an on-prem perspective, but, it's kind of daunting to think about how does that translate going from legacy into the cloud, right? So I think that totally makes sense. And then, it's kind of split evenly with the other lack of resources. Some people have compliance mandates that they're going to be looking at. And then, of course, cost. Cost comes back into the picture. So what do you think about this, Josh?
Yeah, not surprising. Everybody knows, I think, you think about what happened to Capital One, and I think security is top of mind right now as the things that are hitting the news feeds, I would say. When you think about going out to cloud, it's daunting, in the reality of the engineering teams seem to pick it up because it's right up their alley. It was built for builders, as AWS would put it, is that they can develop, they can inherit a lot of those capabilities quickly. But then as you move into security, a lot of that, we know that the security workforce out there, there's challenges with it. There's not a vast workforce from a security perspective that also are moving with the cloud, because it was, I would say, hard enough for us to really secure that the corporate environment. Now you're moving into, as our chief security officer coins it, a new terrain. You're moving into that another terrain, so you're going to have to bring in some new capabilities. And again, if that is not your your core competency, your core competency most time is to build your product and service and market. So I can see how a lot of organizations need to lean on a partner, lean on somebody who this is what they do every day, and from a security perspective, so that way you can get back to what you do, and that's build your product and services. MJ, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm actually really happy to see that the audience is thinking about it exactly the way that we think about it, Josh. Security is always probably topic number one when you're going in and creating these plans and these journeys with clients. It's always on the forefront. It's how can they ensure that proper security measures are going to be in place, not only for their existing applications, but for new workloads. Again, by moving to the cloud, a lot of times it opens up the door to so many new workloads that they just don't have today. So they want to ensure the security aspect is in place and functioning as it should. And that's always on the top of any discussion. And then the second is the lack of resources. It's exactly why a company like ours, Nexus, is in business, to be honest, right? That's what we're here for. We're here to help our clients make the right decisions based on our experiences, based on our knowledge, and also based on our engineering staff, which is going to help you throughout your migration path and your new and also modernization. We're going to help train and really help guide the clients to make those decisions and hopefully reduce any potential risk.
Absolutely. So I guess let's start talking about, we talked a little bit about how we see, I would say, the landscape changing and what's cloud's impact and its cloud services, what it's brought, I think, from the way we think about initiatives on a daily basis, as I would say MJ and I make decisions of initiatives. Well, let's talk a little bit about maybe like the how-to, right? Let's talk a little bit about how do you start thinking about it, and what are some of those first steps that you need to take? MJ, I'll let you take this one.
Sure. So when we're aligned, and as we've been talking about throughout this webinar, is really ensuring that all the stakeholders are identified up front and that there's alignment that eventually has to transition down and into your actual strategy. And there's a lot of different factors that are going to have to be considered, and a lot of decisions that are going to have to be made. Because let's face it, when you're moving to the cloud, it is going to be inherently different than what you're used to today. If you have data centers and colos, you're used to actually having your hardware and being able to configure it the best way that makes sense for your organization today. But going into the cloud, there are changes that have to be considered, where maybe you're not necessarily going to be using the same exact networking hardware that you're used to. You're going to transition that into more of a software-based model. And as Josh has been saying, infrastructure as code, that's definitely a very important factor. And you have to be able to grasp that knowledge, possibly make some adjustments. But at the end, if you're thinking about it from a modernization standpoint, if you're thinking about it from, being able to become more cloud native, excuse me, then these type of decisions, they will come, and they will come naturally. And then as long as you have someone there that has the know-how and understanding of what those decisions and the impact they're going to make, then absolutely, that strategy will be strong. And now we have a common goal to work towards.
As MJ talked about, he talked about a lot of, I would say, planning and the way we think about it from a strategic perspective is, what you have depicted in front of you is really all the things that we really think about when we're thinking about objectives, and we're thinking about what are some of the things that we need to leverage, either it be from cost, or maybe we need to get a feature out in market to become a leader in X space, or you really think about it from an overall strategy perspective. And a lot of the teams, if you're an engineering team or you're a security team or whatnot, if you've been in product development, a lot of this will look familiar to you. Probably some of the newer things that you'll notice is more of the cloud platform assessments from your due diligence perspective. So you'll see, we'll go into the next slide, but you'll see that when you start getting into how do I make this leap? This is where, like MJ alluded to, where Cloud Nexa, that's where it's born. So if you're thinking about it, I would say you want to leverage sometimes a partner to help you with some of the assessment phases, with some of this is what I have today and this is where I could be tomorrow, and they can kind of paint you that journey, that picture, if you will, at least in the due diligence phase. So that way you're not getting into large resources and then finding out later that you have an oops or a gotcha. Not that you couldn't do continuous improvement, because that's what my teams would tell me is like, Josh, we're agile. And so I think that that's great. However, you can save a lot of time if you go and then you partner with somebody and you start doing a little bit of that due diligence early. But when you start getting into the I would say transformation phase of I've adopted now a cloud strategy, and you start thinking about how do my business objectives and all of my corporate objectives, how do they line up to really that sort of concrete plan, you start digging into very quickly, at least at my desk, and I'm sure MJ's, we get to ROI very fast. We start to say, we get to, okay, if we do this, what does it cost us? What's the time frame, and what's the risk associated to it? What am I looking at from a full profile perspective if we do or if we don't? Because you quickly get into you're going to need partners. You're going to need that expertise to help you along, whether it be a Cloud Nexa to help you get there with the strongest engineering and architecture as possible, and an Armor to help you with a lot of the security planning and compliance services. So I would say then you line up to, now that you have full stop or both ends, I would say, of the equation, you could really start thinking about what are the steps needed to take place. And Armor has devised a secure cloud framework where we think of it in these 5 steps. As you think about how do I plan, validate, build, migrate, and optimize, and most people that are developing products today, you would say, okay, well, that's no different than what I normally do. But I think it is. I think there's a couple of things in here where, if you are, let's say, an agile team, it's I pull a couple of folks away from a sprint to really, swarm is what it's called, to figure out, or how do I build something net new? Or how do I get some feature into market? And I start really, I'm sorry, it's not swarm, I said spike. So anybody that's on my team, they probably heard that and said, Josh, that's actually a spike. So you really think about how do you go and assess and plan, in many stages through that, right? And I think it always starts with what's your business objective? My business objective is like what we talked about earlier. It could be cost savings. It could be time to market concepts. It could be quick movement in market. It could be a strategic play. So I think when you start thinking about that, you have to then start validating, where you start putting together your POCs. And my team does tons of POCs. As we're going into new features or new capabilities, there's a POC to be had to really line up to was your theory true? Does it hold true? Does it hold to what you're planning for? And then when you build it out and you migrate it, you really start thinking about, now that it's in production, everybody knows as you get into the cloud, it's going to be that continuous improvement. So then you get into that optimized phase. So did it really, as I built out the product, does it have all the users that we intended to build? Does it have the right resiliency? Does it have the right scale? And then you start moving through that optimized phase into making sure that you're nurturing your product. And I think that's where the cloud is strong, is that you can, at an API call, you can drive to new services and new infrastructure very quickly. MJ, I'll hand it over to you. What do you think about the plan concepts?
Absolutely. The plan concepts, yes, they are recognizable. However, like Josh said, the steps are different. And that's where, when you really want to take advantage of the cloud and you embrace that journey into the cloud, one thing you're going to learn very, very quickly is the pace of innovation. And because the cloud just is continually and rapidly improving at all times, this cycle is just, it's so continuous. And like Josh mentioned several times, you're always striving for continuous improvement. But what the cloud is bringing is just inherent improvements to the services and new services being offered. So if you can start that journey in understanding and really decoupling your layers, your many layers of your application, your environment, you can start taking advantage of those innovations and those new services much quicker. And you can build that into your process, and you can build that into your environment, and really start understanding the true value of what cloud is bringing, as opposed to more of that traditional sense.
And you start thinking about, when cloud originated, it was really an IT. It was built for builders, right? AWS was focused on the builder community, and they were really targeted at that mid-market space. And it was really the engineering teams going, I would say, in isolation and reading, the books to kind of get you into this infrastructure as code, and everybody had them on their desks, right? And so what you started thinking about was that was really the IT, I would say, strategic objectives. But when you think about where the cloud is today, it's really rolling into your more business requirements, more into what are the strategic goals of the organization. And as you saw a couple of slides back, it's really around, is it some cost measures? Is it speed of deployment? So as you think about those two things, are intertwined, so they go hand in hand. When you're starting now that's what we've sort of matured into, which sort of brings the full cycle of a cloud strategy, right? So you're thinking about not only how can I benefit from my IT initiatives, but you really now can layer in your business objectives and business requirements to focus in on how do you come up with a full scope of not only just cloud strategy, how do I get there, but truly a secure, compliant cloud strategy. And those two things, I think, formulated together, I think go hand in hand. MJ, what do you think?
Yeah, and Josh mentioned it before about POCs. I can't stress enough the importance of POCs, because the planning and the assessment is continually happening, and it's going to continually change throughout your processes. POCs are so important to the pure fact that what the cloud is offering is many different ways to achieve a goal, but you have to select the one that works best for you and your organization, and that's the challenge. And during your planning and assessing, if you're doing proper POCs along with those decision points, you're going to be able to feel very confident in your migration path, in your move, in your decisions for your new application development. It's going to feel, much more natural to you as you learn more about what these different services are offering, and why there's 5 or 6 services that essentially you feel may offer the same result, but they're different. They're different for everybody.
And as you start thinking about a strategy, and you start sitting there and saying, okay, well, we're just going to use AWS for a second, and start thinking about, okay, well, what is that bolt on in? And, how do you, as you get into the cloud, do some of those providers help you with some frameworks? And this is why AWS has a WellArchitected Framework, and they talk about, the goal of it was to make sure that it helped architects build secure, high-performing, resilient, and efficient infrastructure for their applications. So they really put some thought into how do you put this framework together. But again, if you're getting into this journey, or you're getting into, I'm about to build my next idea, within AWS, sometimes a DIY approach is good. However, you can benefit from some learnings as, MJ and Cloud Nexus, this is what they do. They're born to help folks along with this journey, to help you build and engineer and architect infrastructures out there. So you're out there so that you're not alone. So as you're thinking about your cloud strategy, your business objective, IT objectives, when you start laying it all out in front of you, you could walk away and say, this is daunting, right? It is a large task for me to now just benefit from, let's just say, the cost, the economical portion of what AWS brings you. But you can leverage organizations like a Cloud Nexus or Armor to help with the security and compliance portion of things. So you're not alone. So as you move into this, there are frameworks identified by the cloud vendors that we all have mastered to make sure that as you take that next step, we're here to support. MJ?
Yeah, and I mean, it's a great framework that AWS put together. We encourage going through the process of a well-architected review at a minimum yearly basis. It helps you understand what new innovations, if you're not always on top of it, and I wouldn't expect anyone to be, because there's just so much going on, not only within AWS, but with vendors and supporting partners out there, to continue your well-architected process and ensuring that you're not left behind with your infrastructure and you never set it and forget it, because it's not that mindset anymore, especially within cloud. And I'll just say one thing that's extremely important within doing the well-architected is the security review and the security assessment process. And I know that's one area that we leverage Armor all the time, is we need to ensure that the compliance needs are being made, but also that there's no gaping holes within their security posture.
Perfect. And then we get into sort of what does that look like. So if you guys are familiar, this is actually from Microsoft, but this kind of gives you what that migration planning would look like. So whether you're taking baby steps of, I'm just going to lift and shift my current architecture into the environment, or I'm going to go ahead and go further and I'm going to modernize my application to start using some serverless capabilities. This sort of gives you sort of that planning set where you can sit down and look at it and, where are we at? Where should we go? How do I think about my migration plan, and what could I use as far as materials to be able to help you plan it out, so that way you have sort of a jump off point to start understanding what are some of those questions that you need to be asking yourself, and how do you go and attack it. So it sort of gives you a little bit of a roadmap to start, or a little bit of a help document to kind of get you through it. So if you look at it, everything that we talked about, obviously we have all of these plan components. We touched on a few of these items throughout the webinar, but you really think about, as you have to go through this journey, these are all the aspects that you have to have top of mind as you move through this journey. But I will say, as you think about the security and compliance aspect, or you think about your journey, you start looking at how does this come up, or what are the things that I have to be thinking about. So we broke it up into a couple of policy, technology, and environment. And I will tell you this, you want to go as fast as possible, but you also want to have a risk profile associated, or have risk top of mind. So you want to make sure the wheels don't fall off, and you want to make sure that you're not the next organization that's on those news feeds. So you always want to make sure that you're rounding out from a security and compliance perspective. How do you transform in a safe and secure manner? MJ, closing thoughts?
Yeah, just to close it out, moving to the cloud, it's a great journey. It's a lot of fun. It's very exciting. And it's same with modernization and transformation. There's a lot going on in the space, and the expectations, absolutely, let's get there, let's go all in, let's move fast, and that's fantastic. But just encourage you to make sure you're taking those proper steps, make sure you're having proper plans in place, make sure you're doing those POCs, because you really have to make those decisions, and sometimes those decisions, they're going to stick with the journey for a while. If you're looking at what containers means to you, what machine learning means to you, what microservices mean, there's a lot of different concepts, and it doesn't mean that every concept applies to every organization. You really have to find that sweet spot for what helps you achieve your goals and objectives.
Perfect, MJ. So some of the materials that you guys saw, those of you that are in the webinar, you guys will get this sent to you. If you look at the Devising a Secure Cloud Strategy, it's actually something that you can work with. It's fill it in, you can utilize it. It's not just a white paper, so you can actually leverage it. But we will put it on our website soon. But for those of you on the phone, you will receive it. And as you start looking at the migration framework, that as well will be put online coming soon. Rachel, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Josh and MJ, for providing such great details about crafting your secure cloud strategy, and then how to enable, business priorities through the cloud. At this time, we will go ahead and transition to the question and answer portion of the webinar. If you've not already submitted your questions, please feel free to use the question function and submit them now. And while you are submitting your questions, I do want to ask all attendees to participate in the quick survey that will be sent out right after we end the webinar, and you can provide us a little bit of your feedback. Also, if you think about a question once the broadcast is closed, you can also submit any of your questions in that feedback survey, and we'll be sure that Josh and MJ see those, and we will be sure that you get an answer back via email. So with that said, why don't we jump into our first question? How early should we think about injecting security in our product development process?
Well, you know, the new buzz right now is obviously the shift left. So shift left is getting coined around, you know, how do you get closer to the development process, and how do you get into what started making it famous was really the you call it the containers. And when containers came on, it was really, how do I scan the code before it gets into production so that way I understand what's going on? Well, now you see it's progressing. You know, I would say that start at the developers, start making sure it's a code level deal. I mean, there's some nice technology that's moving out there right now. There's companies like Protego, and they'll assess your code and it'll come out with permissions and rules in AWS, so you know that there's not wildcards out there. And so what I would say is so shift left, get as close to the code as possible. And so I would say in your planning and development phases, get to the code before it ends up in production. MJ?
Yeah, completely agree. The closer you can get to the developers, the better. If you're waiting to the point of a alpha or beta product and then looking at it when it becomes infrastructure, I think it's too late at that point, because it's going to cause you, it could possibly cause you a lot of rework. So if you can get it closer to that, the developers in that development cycle, the better off you are. It's an extremely important topic, and it's got to be on the forefront of those discussions and planning day one.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thanks, guys. Yeah, we've got one more. I think this one's pretty interesting. It says, we're already in the cloud, but they're not yet seeing the benefits that they thought they would. Any recommendations for next steps?
MJ, this is right up your alley. MJ, I'll let you grab that one.
Yeah, it actually goes exactly into the slide earlier about the well-architected review. I would definitely encourage you to go through, to select a partner, and to go through one of those reviews. You're going to learn a lot about your current environment, maybe some items you missed or misconfigurations, but also learn about what the true goals were that you wanted to achieve and that you were thinking about when you made that initial step to migrate. I'll be honest, more often than not, a lot of our clients come to us and they already are in the cloud. It's a big aspect, and you just need to step back and be like, okay, you know, let's maybe do a little bit of a reset here, understand what you have deployed, and then take an assessment and go through the different 5 pillars and see where we can help with improvement and remediation to get you back on track and meet those expectations.
Yeah, and I would say, you know, a lot of times when we see that, it's a lot of organizations that basically took their application and normally left the same architecture as they move into the cloud. They really didn't take that next step, sometimes of modernization, of leveraging some of the extra capabilities that cloud can bring you. So I would say that, yeah, definitely find a partner, get a Cloud Nexus or somebody to assess, not just at a utilization level, but really dive into the architecture and allow for an organization like them to help you architect sort of what that true modernization would be to meet the business objectives. So as we went through the slides, you really heard us really talk about from a strategic level of how we think about things, and a lot of times it's a cost factor. So you really want to leverage the expertise of folks like Cloud Nexus to help you align what you're trying to do in cloud and make sure that it backs into what your corporate or business objectives were.
Perfect. We're seeing, you know, a lot of our clients, yes, while they're moving to cloud, they may also still be remaining, you know, so much of their data on-prem, right? So there's this hybrid usage going on between clouds, and then usage with that on-prem too. So what are organizations doing to secure their new hybrid environment as a start, especially when they've come from that mindset of, you know, just on-prem?
Yeah, MJ, I'll take a stab at this one. So obviously this is what Armor does. So if you think about what is the problem statement we're trying to solve, it's really that. It's organizations that have a hybrid footprint or you're a multi cloud, you really start thinking about all layers of your infrastructure from a network down. So as you think about the network and as you think about the compute, you really want to make sure that it comes all together in a single pane of glass. So that way you have the same, I would say, 24/7 detection monitoring groups, as well as the incident response process mapped to all of your environments. So you want to start first with visibility, then you want to move into from visibility, or what are you trying to achieve? So let's take it in, double click a little bit, and you say I have some ASAs or I have network equipment that I need the logs sent to some source where their correlation can happen to make sure that we can detect any wrong activity. So you think about that statement or that scenario that goes across your hybrid to public cloud. And you want to bring it all in to make sure that it's all coming together through one source of an incident response process, as well as one source of technology. So Armor does that. This is what we do. We want to make sure that you're secure as you're moving your strategy, because we feel that there's really no point in you building a cloud strategy or to get the cost savings if you're not secure or compliant through the whole process. MJ?
Completely agree. There's nothing more difficult than using several different products to manage your environment. So if you can consolidate and leverage, what Armor has to offer in their products and services, it makes the journey, it makes the transition, and more importantly, the management of it much more efficient. We are a managed service provider, and I can tell you, we see clients in hybrid clouds all the time. And it's just the difficulty and challenges that we face when the client brings several different vendors to manage their environments. It's very inefficient. So what Armor has created and offers is it's perfect for managing that type of use case.
Awesome.
Perfect. I think that is it for our questions. So thank you guys so much. I'll kick it back over to you, Josh, if you guys have any, and MJ, if you guys have any last words before we wrap up.
No, I'd say everybody, thanks for joining. Our emails are out there, and I probably can speak for MJ as well, but feel free to email us. We're here as a resource. We like to share our knowledge. We've accrued over the last 20 plus years, but we're there for you. So email if you have any questions. MJ?
Same here. Absolutely. Reach out anytime. And thank you all for joining us this afternoon.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. If you've enjoyed today's webinar, we will definitely be sending out those resources we've talked about, the template and how-to guide, as post resources from this webinar. If you'd also like to attend any of our other upcoming webinars, you can go to armor.com/events. As a quick preview, we will be focusing on ransomware, and specifically in the healthcare industry, for our September webinar. So if that is of interest to you, please feel free to go and sign up. Again, I'd like to thank Josh and MJ for you guys participating today, and everyone on board. And we will see you next time we have our webinars.